What if I told you that staying silent could make you the most powerful person in the room? Picture this. You walk into a crowded room buzzing with noise. Everyone's talking over each other, desperate to be seen, to be heard. But you say nothing. You don't need to. You remain still, calm, centered, and strangely, the noise around you begins to fade. One by one, people start to notice. The room grows quieter. Their attention shifts toward you. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't. There's a certain mystery to silence, a strength that words can't always offer. And in this video, we're going to explore why silence isn't just golden, it's powerful. We'll break down how saying less can make you more influential, more respected, and more in control of your life than any perfectly crafted speech ever could. Ready to see how staying quiet can transform the way people respond to you and how you see yourself? Stay with us. What you're about to learn might forever change how you speak, or rather, how you don't. Let's begin with this idea. Words reveal, but silence protects. Every time you speak, you give something away: impatience, uncertainty, fear, or even just too much information. Most people don't realize how quickly they expose themselves with words. They speak without restraint, unaware that every sentence is like a window into their inner world. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said that nature gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we speak. But as he observed, most people do the opposite. They believe speaking more makes them appear smarter or more important. In truth, it often makes them seem desperate, exposed, and even weak. On the other hand, silence becomes a kind of armor. When you keep your thoughts and emotions guarded, you don't just protect yourself, you create intrigue. People don't gain power by being fully understood. They gain power by being just out of reach. Unpredictable, mysterious. Silence isn't about passivity. It's a higher form of control. You stop reacting impulsively to the world and start shaping how the world reacts to you. Every word you say broadcasts a piece of your inner self, your values, doubts, insecurities, dreams, and the more you reveal, the easier it becomes for others to twist those words, to use them against you. Most people talk themselves into trouble. They over-explain, overshare, overreact, thinking they're defending themselves, when really, they're just giving away more ammunition. The Stoics knew better. For them, true wisdom began when a person learned to master their tongue. Epictetus believed that restraint was the first step to strength. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Especially in heated moments, when emotions run high, choosing to remain quiet is choosing to remain in control. You avoid pointless arguments. You don't say things you'll regret. You strip others of the opportunity to twist your words. Instead, you listen, you observe, you gather information, people's words, actions, and hidden motives, while others fill the air trying to prove something. You hold your ground and collect insight. That's not apathy. That's power, real power, because the strongest position in any argument is the one where you don't need to speak at all. Have you ever noticed what happens when someone suddenly stops talking in the middle of a conversation? The room tenses. People lean in. Silence unsettles them. Why? Because silence creates a void, and people are uncomfortable with empty space. So they rush to fill it, and in doing so, they reveal even more. But the person who remains composed in that silence, he owns the room. He doesn't beg for attention. He commands it, without a word. His stillness becomes the loudest voice. So what happens when you speak less and observe more? silence unsettles people, and in that discomfort, they start revealing more about themselves than they ever intended. See, when you remain quiet, others are forced to guess what you're thinking. And in doing so, they begin to project their own thoughts, fears, and insecurities onto you. But here's the thing. They're doing all the work. You're not revealing anything, yet they're painting pictures in their minds. Each projection they make tells you more about them, while keeping you completely hidden. It's like watching a movie on a projector. You see vivid images, colorful details, but the source behind it remains concealed. That's what happens when you master silence. You become the blank canvas onto which others unconsciously reveal themselves. And in a world obsessed with control, being predictable is dangerous. If people can easily understand your patterns, your motivations, or your reactions, they can use them against you. That's why the man who talks too much is often the easiest one to defeat. He's laid out his map, his fears, his values, his buttons, all out in the open. But the man who stays quiet, his intentions are unclear, his strengths are hidden. You don't know what drives him. You don't know what he's capable of. And that unknown, that unsettling mystery, makes others nervous. But for you, it becomes a source of immense inner strength. That kind of presence doesn't require noise. It requires discipline. A wise person doesn't speak unless their words carry true meaning. Just like a seasoned warrior doesn't draw his sword unless he intends to use it. So the next time you feel the urge to speak, pause, ask yourself, am I speaking to understand, or just to feel better? If it's just for comfort, hold your tongue, maintain the silence, trust your strength in that stillness. Because in doing so, you're not only guarding your emotions, you're building something far more powerful. You're building presence, the kind of steady, calm presence that doesn't need to explain itself to be respected. The kind of presence that speaks volumes without a word. Which brings us to this. Silence builds presence. True presence isn't about volume, it's about energy. It's about walking into a room and changing its atmosphere without forcing anything. The man who doesn't say much but sees everything. He shifts the dynamic just by being there. His silence speaks, and others listen. To the Stoics, stillness was the first and most essential step to lasting impact. Real strength often comes not from loud action, but quiet restraint. Seneca once wrote that in a society addicted to overexpression, silence is seen as uncomfortable, even threatening. And that's exactly why it draws attention. The quiet man doesn't compete for the spotlight, he becomes the spotlight. People can sense when someone is truly seeing others rather than trying to be seen. And that subtle shift makes all the difference. When you stop filling the air with empty words, people begin to notice everything else: your posture, your eyes, your focus. Your silence gives your presence weight, while others are rushing to be liked, to fill space with chatter. They lose something rare: mystery. And mystery? That draws people in, deeply, even when they don't know why. People lean in, they wonder, they assign meaning to your silence. They feel compelled to understand you. And in doing so, they give you something incredibly valuable: their attention. Because in that silence, people don't just see you, they see their own hopes, fears, and projections. And suddenly, you hold power, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it by saying nothing at all. When you stay silent long enough, your presence begins to carry weight, a kind of psychological gravity that others can't ignore. Think about the most influential people in history: leaders, generals, philosophers. Not all of them were talkative. In fact, Many of them were incredibly quiet. But when they did speak, the room fell silent. Every ear turned toward them. Their power didn't come from constant chatter. It came from trust, from inner calm, and most of all, from the discipline to remain silent until it truly mattered to speak. Marcus Aurelius didn't need to shout to be heard across the Roman Empire. He didn't demand attention, he embodied it. That's right, when he spoke, his words carried weight, because they were backed by long moments of intentional silence. Today, many men try to earn respect by being loud, posting constantly, sharing hot takes, showing off status and success. But the Stoic way is different. You don't add layers to your image, you strip them away. You let go of the urge to perform. You release the pressure to prove anything. And what remains is rare. A man who doesn't need to speak to be taken seriously. A man whose quiet strength causes others to adjust their tone around him. Practicing silence isn't just about lowering your voice. It's about controlling your presence, slowing your breath, staying calm, looking people in the eye before you say a single word. And then, something happens. After a few days, people begin to sense it. When they speak to you, they soften their tone. They choose their words more carefully. They've learned something about you, without you having to teach it. You don't speak to be heard. You speak to move people. And when someone carries themselves with focus, control, and composure, they simply can't be ignored. Lesson 3. Talking destroys mystery. Have you ever noticed how the quietest people are often the most intriguing? That's because power thrives in mystery. It sparks curiosity. It builds tension. It pulls people in. But every time you talk without purpose, you chip away at that mystery. You become easier to read, easier to predict, and over time, less magnetic. The Stoics believed that people should have full control over their words, because they understood something simple but profound. Once spoken, words can never be taken back. Aristotle once said, "The more we value things outside of our control, the less control we have." And what's less in your control than how other people interpret what you say? When you talk too much, you overexpose yourself. You start to speak about things no one asked. You offer justifications, share backstories, explain emotions, things that could have remained yours alone. You think you're building connection, but really, you're stripping away the very thing that once made you unforgettable. People stop caring, not because you're not good enough, but because they've already seen too much. Mystery pulls people in. It makes them lean closer, physically, emotionally, just to try and understand you. But when you lay everything bare, when there's nothing left to guess, the game is over. And a puzzle, once solved, rarely holds any power. People are drawn in by questions, not answers. Your silence makes them wonder, what does he believe in? Where are his limits? What does he think of me? And that wondering captures their attention. They listen more carefully. They choose their words more wisely. They become more aware, because your restraint becomes a mirror, showing them their own insecurities. To fill the uncomfortable silence, they start talking more, and the more they speak, the more they reveal, while you remain hidden. That's a psychological advantage very few know how to use. In fact, when someone is naturally quiet, others often feel a deep need not to disappoint him, whether it's in relationships, at work, or in social settings. Why? Because when you haven't revealed everything, they can't figure you out. They don't know what you think of them. They're unsure how you really feel. And that uncertainty makes them sharper, more respectful, more careful. Now, compare that to the man who talks constantly. He overshares. He tries too hard to be liked. He's easy to read and easier to ignore. Being hard to read is a skill. Staying partially unknown is a form of power. When you control your tongue, you don't just reshape your own self-perception, you reshape how others see you. You give them space to imagine. You allow them to fill in the blanks, not out of boredom, but out of respect. You become a story they can't quite solve. Because once someone believes they've figured you out, they stop searching. But if you leave just enough behind the curtain, they'll always stay curious, always watching. Fourth, over-explaining is a sign of insecurity. The man who constantly explains himself is silently asking for validation. He believes that the more he talks, the more control he has over how people see him. But in truth, it exposes his fear. It's like he's trying to convince himself and everyone else that he's good enough, that he belongs, that he matters. The Stoics saw this behavior for what it really was. Not strength, not confidence, but a waste of energy, a sign of weakness, and eventually, a path towards self-destruction. Epictetus put it perfectly: if you want to improve, be content to appear ignorant about what you don't know. You don't need to explain every action, every thought, every emotion. What matters is that you own them, quietly, confidently, and then let your actions speak louder than any words ever could. As we saw earlier, when you over-explain yourself, you begin to lose people's respect. Now let's go deeper. What really happens when you feel the need to explain every action and thought? When you constantly explain yourself, you're unknowingly handing others control over who you are. You're no longer acting out of confidence. You're acting out of a need to be accepted. You begin justifying every decision, every sentence, every behavior, hoping it'll help people understand and approve of you. But ironically, this only makes you appear less important in their eyes. Someone who's always trying to prove their worth earns no respect. People value those who are simply themselves, calm, grounded, unapologetic. As the Stoic philosopher Zeno once said, well-being is attained little by little. But it is no small thing. Stability comes not from convincing others, but from living consistently in alignment with your values. Picture a man who's always saying things like, I did this because. I said that because I wanted. I chose this because. Exhausting, isn't it? Not only is it annoying to hear, but worse, it reveals that he doesn't fully believe in what he's saying. Because if he did, he wouldn't feel the need to explain it. The more you talk, the more opportunity you give others to question or judge you. And once that door is open, it's hard to close again. But when you resist over-explaining, when you allow silence to fill the gaps, people actually start to respect you more, even if they don't fully understand you. They watch your actions and see truth behind your words, and that is enough. The Stoics deeply understood this form of quiet power. Take Alexander the Great, for example. He was one of history's most effective rulers, and he didn't need to explain himself to anyone. His decisions and convictions weren't padded with lengthy justifications. He led with passion, clarity, and an unwavering sense of purpose. When you live like that, something powerful happens. People stop questioning you. They no longer interrogate your intentions. They focus on what you do, not what you say. The quiet man doesn't need to justify his actions. He acts. That's enough. So the next time you feel like explaining yourself, pause. Trust in what you're doing. Remind yourself that you don't need approval. Your worth isn't up for negotiation. It already exists. Speak only when necessary. And when you do, make sure it's because your words matter, not because you're chasing validation. Lesson 5. Silence amplifies your words. The less you speak, the more power your words carry. And here's why. When you talk too much, your words begin to lose their weight. People who talk too much and too often eventually fade into background noise. They become forgettable, not because they lack intelligence, but because they waste their voice. Their constant talking weakens the power of their presence. But wise individuals are different. They choose their words with precision. They don't speak often, but when they do, it's with purpose, and that makes their words powerful. The Stoic philosophers understood this deeply. They believed that words should be used to bring clarity, not to fill empty space. Seneca once said, "Speech is the mirror of the soul. What a man says, that is what he is." In other words, your words reveal who you are, and the more intentional you are with what you say, the more respect you earn in the eyes of others. Think back to a moment when tension filled the room and everyone suddenly fell silent. All eyes turned toward the person who finally spoke, because the silence had created gravity. That's what quiet can do. People listen more closely when you talk less. They lean in, they wait, because they know, when you do speak, it's not small talk, it means something. In this way, silence becomes the best way to begin a meaningful conversation. It creates space. It stirs curiosity. It gives your words a landing place. Now think about how much time we waste talking about things that don't matter. Social media posts, gossip, trying to sound smart in meetings. Every unimportant word you say dilutes your voice. It's like giving away a piece of your power each time you speak without purpose. But when you choose to hold back, when you wait for the right moment, your words gain strength. They feel intentional. They carry the weight of thought, reflection, and self-control. Marcus Aurelius understood this perfectly. As emperor, he didn't need to speak often to earn attention. When he did speak, people listened. His journal, Meditations, is filled with short, profound thoughts, each sentence packed with meaning. No wasted words. He knew that speaking without purpose would weaken his authority. Instead, his rare words became powerful because they were rare. Even his pauses had meaning. Each moment of silence made his next words hit harder. So, what does that mean for you? Remember this. Your words should be precious, not plentiful. Whether you're leading a team, having a conversation with a friend, or just going through everyday life, choose your words with care. Speak only when it matters. And when you do, say something meaningful. People will respect you, not because you talk more, but because they know you only speak when it truly counts. Sometimes, it's silence that gives your words the most power. Because the man whose voice carries the farthest is the one who has first mastered when not to speak. Lesson 6. Silence commands respect. Respect isn't earned by talking. It's earned by what you do, by being present, and, most importantly, by staying quiet. When you stay quiet, something interesting happens. People start adjusting to you, not the other way around. They begin to choose their words more carefully. They respect your space, your pace, your energy, while everyone else rushes to speak, to be noticed, to fill the air with noise. You remain still, and that stillness creates a magnetic pull. Why does the quiet person stand out in a loud room? Because silence invites curiosity. People assume he must have something important to say. Otherwise, why would he stay so quiet? He doesn't rush to speak because he's perfectly fine with the silence. And that comfort, that calm, that inner control? The Stoics saw it as strength of the highest form. A person who feels the need to comment on everything is often seen as foolish. But someone who only speaks when it truly matters, that's wisdom. The wise man isn't trying to fill dead air. He's not interested in joining meaningless chatter. He speaks only when his words can create impact, and until that moment comes. He waits, and in that waiting, his silence grows in power. This is where true respect is born. People begin to notice. You don't need to constantly express your emotions or opinions. You don't chase approval. You don't try to win people over with words. Instead, your restraint speaks for itself. Your silence becomes your message. Think about how people treat a man who doesn't say much. He walks into a room, and people instinctively sit up straighter. He doesn't demand attention, but he gets it. And when he finally does speak, everyone listens, not because he's loud, but because his words are rare. They carry weight. You don't need to earn this kind of respect with noise. You earn it through consistency, discipline, and control. The more grounded you are, the more powerful your silence becomes. And once you've built that foundation, something else happens. Your voice becomes more valuable. People begin to seek out your opinion. They want to know what you think, not because you offer it often, but because you don't. They've come to trust your judgment. They know you won't speak unless it matters. Compare that to the man who never stops talking, always explaining, always seeking validation, always trying to jump into every conversation. Over time, his words start to feel empty. People stop listening, not because he's wrong, but because he's predictable. His voice becomes background noise. And worst of all, he gives no one the space to truly engage with him. But the quiet man, he creates space. He brings mystery. He allows people to lean in, to wonder, to feel something deeper. That's why people are drawn to him. Not because he demands their attention, but because he commands it without saying much at all. And this principle doesn't just apply to personal interactions. It holds true in the workplace too. A strong leader doesn't need to talk constantly. A strong leader listens. He speaks when necessary, and when he does, his words mean something. His silence doesn't reflect weakness, it reflects confidence. He doesn't need to prove himself, his actions already do. Let's explore how that same silence becomes a powerful shield in the next part. After all, true respect doesn't come from how loud you speak. It comes from how deeply you're understood without needing to say much at all. And that's exactly what makes quiet strength so powerful. When a man leads with calm, makes decisions without drama, and doesn't rush to fill silence with noise, people notice. His composure becomes magnetic. His restraint becomes something others admire, even envy. So, if you're seeking to be respected, begin by mastering your silence. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you must constantly speak to prove your worth. Don't try to impress by showcasing your intelligence or over-explaining your actions. Just be present. Let your stillness speak volumes before you say a single word. In time, people will respect you not for the quantity of your words, but for the intention behind the few you choose to say. They'll start leaning in when you speak, listening more closely, not because you raise your voice, but because your voice has become rare and meaningful. 7. Silence forces others to think. When you stay silent, something powerful happens. You create space, mental space, for others to reflect. Instead of rushing to speak, they pause. Instead of reacting impulsively, they begin to consider their own words more carefully. You're not just withholding speech, you're shaping thought. In every conversation, the one who talks the most may seem to dominate. They lead the rhythm, drive the discussion, especially during arguments. But the one who listens silently, that person becomes the unexpected mirror. Others begin to hear their own flaws, rethink their stance, and sometimes even talk themselves into self-correction. That's the power of silence. It doesn't challenge, it doesn't interrupt, it simply invites clarity. The Stoics mastered this skill. They believed the true power of language comes from thoughtful reflection, not reaction. In many of their writings, they urged us to engage in deep inner dialogue, to pause, to ask ourselves, is this worth saying? And if it isn't, then don't say it. Remember what Epictetus taught. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. When you do that, when you choose to listen more, you don't just understand people better. You give them the gift of understanding themselves. Have you ever noticed how, when you stop talking, others often start thinking more clearly? Sometimes they even reveal things they wouldn't have, just to fill the silence. In debates or disagreements, this silence becomes a trap for the other person. They feel the need to fill the void, and in doing so, they may contradict themselves or reveal a truth they hadn't intended. We explored how silence makes others think more deeply, how it invites reflection rather than confrontation. Now, we go deeper into its hidden power. Silence not only influences others, but it also elevates your presence and reshapes how people see you. This is the hidden power of silence. It's not just the absence of words. It's space for others to pause, to think, to process, to reflect. It's not always about proving your point. It's not always about having the last word in an argument or being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is wait, listen, watch, let someone else do the talking for a change. When used intentionally, silence can completely shift the energy of a conversation. It slows things down, it creates space, it forces others to fill the quiet, and in doing so, they often reveal more than they intended. They begin to notice their own thoughts more clearly. They begin to think, and then they begin to listen to you. 8. Silence enhances your influence. Influence isn't about being loud or taking over the conversation. True influence isn't earned through constant talking, it's felt through presence. Some of the most respected people in any room are the ones who speak the least. They don't fight for attention, and yet, they command it. They lead, not by dominating discussions, but by holding back until their words carry weight. Have you ever noticed this? In a group setting, it's often the quiet one, calm, steady, composed, who ends up in charge. Not because they forced their way in, but because people instinctively look to them for clarity and direction. Being quiet gives you power. It forces others to focus on your energy, your presence, who you are, rather than just what you say. It makes your words rare, and anything rare becomes valuable. On the other hand, when you talk too much, your words lose their edge. They blend into the noise. They become easy to overlook. But when you restrain yourself, when you wait for the right moment, what you say suddenly matters. It sticks. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "What troubles us is not what happens to us, but how we think about what happens." Likewise, how people perceive you is not shaped by what you constantly say. It's shaped by what you choose not to say. This is where silence becomes strategic. It becomes a way to affect people's minds without direct confrontation. When you stay silent, you allow others to speak. You give them the spotlight. And in that space, they reveal themselves, their thoughts, their feelings, even their insecurities. That gives you insight, and insight is influence. You're not making unnecessary jokes. You're not rushing to correct them. You're not talking just to fill the air. You're observing, calculating, choosing your moment, and when you do finally speak, it's not because you need validation. It's because your words are meant to land. Silence also makes people seek your words. Why? Because when you speak rarely, people know it's important. They begin to value your opinion, not because you're always offering it, but because you almost never do. That's the paradox. Say less, and people will care more about what you say. And here's something interesting. Silence can even help you get what you want. It sounds counterintuitive, but think about it. Who do people trust with their thoughts, questions, or doubts? It's often the quiet ones. The ones who seem like they're actually listening. The ones who don't interrupt. The ones who don't feel the need to show how much they know. Because those people feel safe. They don't judge. They give others space. And in doing so, people come to them. So next time you're in a room full of chatter, pause. Let others fill the silence. Let them talk. Let them reveal. Let them come to you. And when they do, they'll listen with greater attention. Because you've built anticipation. Because your silence created curiosity. Because you didn't need their attention, you earned it. Remember this. You don't have to dominate a room to lead it. You don't have to explain yourself over and over to be understood. You don't have to speak loudly to be heard. Let silence do the work. Let your presence speak. Let your restraint become your advantage. Because in a world full of noise, silence is not weakness. It's power. It's depth. It's strategy. And when used well, silence becomes your greatest voice. Silence also opens the door to deeper connection. When people no longer feel rushed to speak, they begin to access more honest emotions. They ask deeper questions. They look at you and wonder, what are you thinking? And when you finally do speak, your words don't just land, they resonate. Because your silence gave them weight. As the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu once said, silence is a source of great strength. It gives you composure. It gives others reflection. And most of all, it gives your words the power to truly matter. When you choose to remain silent, your words begin to carry a different weight. They're no longer just noise to fill a void, but something anticipated, valued, and remembered. Each time you speak, people sense the intention behind every word, measured, thoughtful, deliberate. That's where inner power begins to form. A wise person doesn't need to constantly prove themselves. They don't need to shout to be heard. In fact, it's their silence that draws attention. And when they finally do speak, others naturally listen, because they know that when this person speaks, it matters. Look at the example of the great Stoic emperor, Marcus Aurelius. He never needed to talk too much to demonstrate authority. Instead, he led through actions, through quiet discipline, and thoughtful decisions. His power didn't come from long speeches, but from living with intention and restraint. He didn't demand praise, yet his quiet leadership left a lasting legacy. His silence was not the absence of thoughts, it was a conscious choice. A strategy that made his voice stronger when he finally chose to use it. And you can do the same. When you learn to be quiet, your actions will speak louder than any words. People will understand your values, your mindset, and your strength, without you having to explain it. And when you do speak, people will pay attention, because your voice isn't overused. In this way, silence becomes a powerful form of influence. Not because you spoke the most or the loudest, but because you understood when to hold back, when to listen, and when to speak with conviction. This ability to discern the right moment gives you the power to shift conversations, and even shape the world around you. Now let's go deeper. Silence also cultivates inner peace. Among all the benefits of quietness, perhaps the greatest is the peace it brings within. When you talk less, you create space to hear your own thoughts. In a noisy world full of distractions, demands, and the constant need to explain yourself, silence becomes a sacred refuge. It allows you to pause, step back, and reconnect with your center. The Stoics believed that true peace doesn't come from your surroundings, but from within yourself. Seneca once said, "The best cure for anger is silence." And he was right. Silence, when practiced intentionally, becomes a sanctuary in the middle of chaos. When you're always defending yourself, always reacting, your mind becomes cluttered. You're filling your head with noise, and that makes it harder to hear what your heart is truly saying. You can't understand yourself if you're constantly reacting to the opinions, judgments, and expectations of others. But when you practice stillness, the noise begins to fade. You give yourself the space to ask, what do I truly think? What do I actually feel? What matters to me? Not to impress others, but to fulfill my own purpose? You begin to notice the subtle ways your emotions arise, and instead of reacting out of habit or pressure, you can respond with clarity and awareness. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That's what silence offers, a return to yourself. A space where you don't need approval, where you don't need to perform, where you just are. Imagine sitting in stillness in the early morning. The world hushed, no phone, no conversation, only your breath and your thoughts. That is where true self-awareness lives. That's where you hear the most important voice, your own. You don't need the world to validate who you are when you've already heard it from within. And that is the greatest power of all. From discovering inner peace, we now step into a deeper layer of silence, one where you reconnect with your true self. When you retreat from the noisy outside world and allow yourself time alone, something profound begins to unfold. You start to hear your own inner voice, not the echoes of social expectations, not the pressure of external opinions, but the voice that truly belongs to you. In that silence, your thoughts become clearer, your plans more deliberate, and your actions more intentional. In today's world, where constant stimulation and the pressure to speak up surround us, silence becomes a powerful form of resistance. It's your quiet refusal to be swept away by the noise. In that stillness, you gain the space to observe yourself, to reflect, to grow, and to build true self-awareness. That awareness becomes your foundation for emotional control and clarity. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the sheer volume of mental chatter? Silence helps you escape that noise. It creates a sanctuary where you can truly consider what matters. The more time you spend in quiet, the more connected you become with yourself. And soon, you'll notice that many of the thoughts and words that once filled your mind were unnecessary distractions. As you let go of the constant urge to speak your mind, your thoughts settle, your emotions become calmer, your life takes on a more peaceful rhythm. Silence, then, becomes more than a strategy for influence. It becomes a path to serenity. And that serenity? That's where true strength and wisdom begin to take root. That leads us to another truth. Silence reflects real confidence. True confidence isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, bragging about achievements, or showing off your intelligence. It's seen in the person who remains calm, composed, and quiet when needed, the person who doesn't speak just to be heard, but instead holds back unless there's something meaningful to say. When you're alone, being silent demonstrates trust in yourself. It shows you don't rely on external approval to validate your worth. This kind of quiet confidence is rare and powerful. It's not built on attention or applause, but on inner certainty. Confidence rooted in the understanding that you don't need to prove yourself is far more stable than the kind that relies on constant talking. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. We win by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." When you choose silence, you are practicing freedom. You're no longer trapped in the endless loop of defending, explaining, or proving. You're no longer controlled by the urge to be heard or validated. Your value doesn't come from what you say or how much attention you receive. It comes from who you are. And let's be clear, being quiet doesn't mean you're shy or insecure. It means you're in control. It means you're grounded. Think about how often people speak just to fill a void, trying to impress, to win approval, or simply to feel like they matter. But the person who doesn't need to do that, the one who can sit quietly and still feel whole, that's someone who understands true confidence. Building on the previous insight about real confidence, the kind that doesn't need to be loud, we now step further into the portrait of the quiet man. Unlike those who constantly try to prove themselves with words, the quiet man has nothing to prove. He doesn't seek praise or validation from anyone. He understands that how people see him is shaped by what he does, not by what he says. His silence doesn't come from fear or anxiety. It's a deliberate choice, one grounded in deep self-belief. He doesn't feel the need to speak all the time, because his presence and actions already speak clearly about who he is. Knowing your limits is also part of the inner confidence that silence brings. A man who talks too much often feels the need to lead or control every conversation. He fears being forgotten or misunderstood. But the quiet man is so secure in himself that he's comfortable stepping back, allowing others to shine. He understands that sometimes the wisest thing you can do is just listen. And when he finally does speak, his words carry weight. They are not casually thrown into the air, they are chosen carefully, spoken with intention, and therefore valued. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and revered Stoic philosopher, was known for this kind of strength in silence. He never sought the crowd's approval. His choices and his actions were his voice. His authority didn't come from how loudly he spoke, but from how deeply he lived by his values and ruled with wisdom. From his life, we learn a profound truth. Real confidence doesn't show up in how much we speak, it shows in how we live. Welcoming silence also invites trust. You no longer need to write out every word to prove you belong. Your quiet presence, grounded and composed, says more about your self-worth than any speech ever could. Some people choose silence over noise, and that kind of calm, steady confidence is far more powerful than any shouting voice. The world may have told you that being loud gives you power, that to get noticed, you must speak more. But the Stoics knew something deeper. The most powerful person is the one who can stay calm and stay quiet in a loud, chaotic world. Every word you withhold builds quiet tension, not of fear, but of presence. Every pause makes you more grounded. Every second of stillness tells the world, I don't need to perform for anyone. So don't talk just to fill the space. Let your actions speak for you. Let your silence leave a mark. Do things that echo far louder than your voice ever could.